Let's look at another section, section 416. Quote, human beings agree in saying that they see, hear, feel, and so on, even though some are blind and some are deaf. So they are their own witnesses that they have consciousness. And notice the quotes here indicate the opponent, Wittgenstein's opponent, someone who is trying to say that people do know their experiences in this fundamental way. They're witnesses to their own consciousness. And here's Wittgenstein. But how strange this is. Whom do I really inform if I say I have consciousness? What is the purpose of saying this to myself, and how can another person understand me? So the problem we have here is that your consciousness is not something that you witness, and it's not something that you testify to. It's a different sort of game. In the game of witnessing, what I do is I look at an object and I say what I see. So if I'm witnessing this, I look at it and I say, oh, it's green, it's squishy, it has these features, and I report on what I'm seeing to you. And looking at my own consciousness doesn't work in the same sort of way. I'm not looking at an object, and so what I'm doing does not count as witnessing. Going on, Wittgenstein says, now, sentences like I see, I hear, I'm conscious really do have their uses. So again, we move from this paradoxical sense of witnessing your consciousness to the unparadoxical use of the terms about seeing and hearing and being conscious. I tell a doctor, now I am hearing with this ear again, or I tell someone who believes I am faint, I am conscious again, and so on. And so here Wittgenstein is demonstrating the actual purpose of language like this, which is to inform people of what's going on with you, not in the ways of a report, but as a kind of behavior, as another way of saying ouch or crying or doing some other kind of behavior to let people know what's going on inside of you. And Wittgenstein says that the reason that it can't be a report is that you can't be right or wrong. So when you're witnessing something, when you're giving testimony about something, there are correctness conditions. And you can say, I see this as green and squishy, and you say, no, that's not green and squishy. It has some other features, right? So you could be right or you could be wrong because there are correctness conditions. In reporting your states, there is no correctness conditions according to Wittgenstein. It's just, like he said, a kind of behavior. And here I'm inclined to say maybe, maybe not. Since I'm a materialist, I think that your consciousness, your pains, your experiences are brain processes, and consequently there are correctness conditions that can be determined based on external evidence. We can know whether you are actually experiencing pain or whether it's phantom pain, for example, or what exactly phantom pain is and how that relates to the more standard kinds of pain. I agree with Wittgenstein that you can't know that you have pain simply by having it. That's not a kind of knowledge. But if pain is indeed a physical process, then someone is in a position to provide correctness conditions. So it's not just a matter of introspection, but it is something that, that is more than just a beetle in a box. That's something that's going on that plays no role at all in our other sorts of language games. If it's a physical process, as I think it is, then it plays a more substantial role than Wittgenstein seems to suggest. Now, 420 is one of my favorite passages because Wittgenstein presses at a kind of thought experiment that's had a long history and even a contemporary history, and I think is deeply problematic. And here's what he says in 420. But can't I imagine that the people around me are automata, lack consciousness, even though they behave in the same way as usual? If I imagine it now, alone in my room, I see people with fixed looks, as in a trance, going about their business. The idea is perhaps a little uncanny. But just try to keep hold of this idea in the midst of your ordinary intercourse with others. So again, we have paradox on the one hand, you have this uncanny feeling as you're sitting alone in your study, imagining, these automata people. But then you go out into the world, in the street, say to yourself, for example, the children over there are mere automata, all their liveliness is mere automism. And you will either find these words becoming quite empty, or you will produce in yourself some kind of uncanny feeling, or something of the sort. And here again, we have that philosophical vertigo, which should be a clue to you that there's some kind of philosophical trap that's going on. And I think he's right. I think that in the real case, we really can't imagine that people that we know are what Dave Chalmers calls philosophical zombies. Chalmers talks about this potential conceivability that it's perfectly imaginable that we can conceive of people who are physically and functionally identical with ourselves, but have no consciousness. And he argues that dualism follows from this conceivability. And others have argued, Dan Dennett and Wittgenstein, that it's not really conceivable that we get this kind of an uncanny feeling when we try to conceive of it. But in a real case where we're actually dealing with, for example, children, running around, and I wanted to get a video for this, but unfortunately, all of the videos when I Google children playing, the children actually do look like automata. They're either selling something or in some other way being set up for the camera. So I couldn't find a nice, genuine children playing video. I'm going to have to work on that. If you have one, send me one and I'll include it in this. But in a normal case, go out to a playground and look at some children, or look at squirrels playing. Some people say that animals are not conscious. We'll talk about that in a minute. But is it really possible to imagine that they're not conscious, that their liveliness and playfulness is really just automatic behavior? I don't think it is possible, but think about that for yourself and try to decide whether you think this is something that isn't physical, that it's possible to separate the physical manifestations of consciousness from the consciousness itself.